Anyway, so it's all coming together and falling apart. So this won't prevent me from doing Stormy Weather this week, although if anyone's hearing this, then this will be the Stormy Weather this week, but it will no doubt be many weeks after I make this recording. And what I'm going to do, I hope, is talk through some ideas that I've been having. Use this opportunity of downtime to try and work out some stuff that I don't have the time and energy to write. This is also the week that I'm putting Homo sapiens together finally. Final finishing touches on the cover and whatnot, so it should be going to the press sometime in the next couple of weeks, barring any setbacks. So the first thing I want to talk about then is the idea of tulpas. The tulpa is a thought form created through visualization, through intent. Well, tulpa is a word that comes from Hindi, I guess, maybe Sanskrit. And there's a well-known story about a tulpa, which is a woman, I think possibly a Western woman, who was studying in India. I would have to reference the exact data, but anyway, who heard about this practice and decided to experiment, and she spent some weeks visualizing, meditating on the image of a monk, and gradually this image began to take form before her, until finally she could see it clearly as a physical being. Not the whole time, but some of the time. And then she found that even when she wasn't trying to summon it, visualize this monk, he began to appear in her life and to be present when she was going about her business, and to all appearances as if a living being was present. And then the final surprise was that she found that as the monk gained solidity and even a certain form of autonomy, that other people were able to see it too. And so it was as if she had actually created a living being, seemed to act with its own will and agenda, merely through very focused visualization and meditation. So she set about breaking apart this tulpa, erasing it, zapping it, sending it back whence it had come, into the realms of the imaginal. Whether this tulpa had any sort of actual autonomy, or was simply acting out her unconscious desires, as if some part of her was dreaming, awake, and she was simply cut off from that part of her, so was perceiving it as an autonomous entity, or whether even it was perhaps being animated by inorganic beings or entities, or indeed whether it actually did believe itself to be autonomous at that point. There are questions that can't be answered at this time, but the idea of the tulpa is a vital, essential idea to understanding the tenets of Masonic Sorcery Theater, or of sorcery in general, but specifically, I believe, of our present situation at this time on what appears to be planet Earth, in what appears to be 2009, in terms of our predicament as sorcerers, as awakening beings, tuning in to another reality, surrounded by billions of non-sorcerer beings, of neurotypical beings, who seem to be entirely oblivious and even opposed or resistant to what it is that we are experiencing and to some extent doing. And then of course the hidden element in this equation, which is the Masonic sorcerers themselves, who are controlling and shaping the neurotypicals and ourselves in order to maintain their hegemony over this reality. So these three factors are interwoven. Essentially, though, I believe there are only two elements within this equation. That is the autists, ourselves, the sorcerers, those of us who are capable, albeit a very limited capacity, of moving our assemblage point, of accessing other realms of our unconscious, realms of the imaginal, and of holding in our consciousness alternate perceptions of reality, of basically optioning alternate means of being and of thought and of functioning. And then there are the Masonic sorcerers who are able to access these realms also, but who are using them not to attain freedom, but to attain total power and total control. I believe these are the only two factors or elements within this realm, and that the vast mass of humanity effectively does not exist. This is my thesis. This is my model that I'm going to be working out now today. And needless to say, it is a shocking model, but I think that it's one that makes a lot of sense, and in the end, like so many of these ideas, they're only shocking if we are attached to, if we are clinging to consensus reality itself. The idea that consensus reality is a lie, is a snare, is a matrix, is an illusion, is a grand deception, itself is shocking to reason, to the personal identity. But once one begins to accept it, it becomes less shocking, because the mere act of accepting it allows us to loosen our hold on this consensus, and so it becomes less threatening. And the same applies to this idea, because the first objection that all of us would have to such an idea is that what I'm suggesting is that most people that we encounter are not actually human beings at all. They do not have souls. They do not exist in any real sense, although don't try telling them that. Now, this idea is, as I say, offensive. It's shocking, but only because we're assuming that they are human beings, and that this is a terrible thing to say about people who have a right to be considered people. But if they're not, then there is nothing threatening about this idea. It's only threatening because we are programmed, conditioned to believe that what we see is what is. In actual fact, what is very different from what we see and perceive. And I think most of us, anyone listening to this show, is going to be able to accept that idea. It's only when I get specific and come up with ideas that are wholly new to this alternate perception, that are alternate even within the alternate perceptions community. It's only then that the resistance begins to kick in. And so anyway, so the objective here, as ever, is as a thought experiment. Let's try not to resist the idea simply reactively, as a reaction. Let's just look at the evidence, but more importantly, perhaps, let's look at the theory in itself. Now, so what we have is the idea of thought forms, tulpas, that are created through the will using psychic energy, and that thereby can develop autonomy and appear to be and even act as living beings. If we first of all accept that this is a possibility, even for, according to the story that I cited, somebody who's not a sorcerer, who's relatively inexperienced and merely experimenting with some idea that she had heard about. Okay, this person is clearly a natural psychic, a natural sorcerer, but it's not somebody who's trained. So it stands